So, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Magical New Beginnings podcast. And today I am really delighted to welcome Christine Schickinger onto this podcast. Welcome, Christine.
Welcome, and we're reading because we were not sure about the last name, which is a German last name. Sorry about that.
Yeah, where did that come from?
Well, I have no idea. Really, it's a very German, and to schicken is to send someone. So
Right.
maybe that's where it comes from.
Oh, okay. Awesome. So let's introduce you. So after overcoming your own severe burnout in 2015, I think we've all been there, well, most of us have been.
Mm.
Christine made it her mission to help leaders safeguard both performance and mental health. She's a certified positive intelligent coach, which I'd like to know more about that, and NeuroGraphica. Is that right?
Yeah.
NeuroGraphica and trust technique practitioner. So we have that in common, that we the trust technique's all about communicating with animals and learning from our lovely animals. So we will get into that as well. And you also host the Lead Well podcast, which is where we met because you interviewed me.
Mhm.
So you translate cutting edge research into practical tools managers can use the very next day. Managers in their business.
Mhm.
And over decades, you have coached hundreds of executives around the globe, taught them how to switch off. Oh my God, we so need that. And always switch off the always on stress response. Excuse me. And even shut them sorry, and even shown them what animals can teach us about compassionate leadership. Wow. If you're ready for a science-based strategy, memorable stories, and fresh dose of inspiration, keep listening to this podcast because Christine is about to show us how to lead well, sleep well, and live well. Oh my God, that's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you for this introduction. So, yeah, I'm really
Okay.
excited to be here, and I look forward to our conversation because I so remember when we had the talk for my podcast, and it was so interesting to listen to you. And yeah, magical new beginnings. Mine obviously was after my burnout.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about that. How do you see that burnout? How did you get to that point of burnout and what did you do?
Hmm. So prior to my burnout, I was a really busy executive. I was working in an American corporation, turned to be their VP for product, was traveling the world. I was having my little suitcase packed every single week, traveling around anywhere 3, 4 times a year. I went to the US, and I felt really important in what I was doing, and I was always on. I mean, I had a global role, so you laugh at me, but when I got up during the night because I needed to go to the toilet, I was checking my email to see whether my Asian friends had something that they needed from me. So this is how bad it was. And but I felt so important. I mean, I felt like I could manage it all and I could juggle it all because this is me, Christine, and I'm really strong and I'm a powerful woman and I can do it all.
Yeah,
And so whenever someone asked me what I would like to have more of, there was one thing that I always mentioned, and that was time. So I always felt that I was letting someone down.
right.
I had a horse at that time, even two at some point, my husband at home, and then my colleagues all over the world. And I was always reporting to the States. So my manager, we had different time zones that added a bit to it. And I always felt that when I was dedicating time to one area, I was letting the other two down. And this really culminated in a situation where I bred a horse. So I had a filly, and She turned like 3, 4 years at that moment, and I wanted to get her started. And
Mhm.
she came into the world handicapped, so it was a really difficult situation with her because I couldn't ask any of the trainers around at my place. I needed a very special person to work with her because she had something that was like a state of autism, really, when that way she behaved. And this person did a program where he started horses only once a year. And that was a 10-day period. And I had to travel there. And at the same time, a month later, I had a really important conference that I needed to prepare for and to create and to prepare all the documentation for at work. And when I traveled to the place where with my horse, when my horse would get started, I found out that they had no internet connection. And this was the most horrible experience, probably in my life, because I was there and I was torn, and I knew my manager in the States, she was really, really harsh. And she had very high expectations, rightfully so. And I knew that I would have had to at least be accessible for them, but I wasn't. And this was horrible. So I spent hours in the day to find out whether we've got connection. And that, yeah, at that time it was hard. And so I was with my horse there. My horse was really in a bad situation because traveling with a horse, as you well know, is not the best thing for them because they feel really anxious about it, and
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
they don't deal with that very well, and especially when you have a handicapped horse. And then this expectation to get her started, and then the expectation from my manager and my husband at home, who was always complaining because I would spend time with everyone else and everything
Apart from
else, but not with him. So this was probably the most difficult 10 days in my life, when I would have needed to enjoy it, because that was about my filly, my young horse being started, and such an important stage in her life. And this kind of wore me out. And the interesting thing is, I didn't even notice at that time. I noticed that I was really stressed,
yes.
but I had not noticed at what stage I was. And then I remember that when I got back, I had to travel to London again, as I always did once a month. And I took some time for myself at the hotel I was staying, and there was a swimming pool, and I put myself in the pool. And as we all love to do, I took a little selfie and posted that on the web. And one person that I just knew from the web, really just from 2, 3 conversations, she sent me a private message and said, "Oh my God, Christine, what's up with you? You look terrible." And this is when I started thinking, and this is when I started realizing how I had changed. And when I got back from London, there were things happening which were really, really strange. So I I I remember myself sitting in front of my computer, and I had an email open and I wanted to answer the email, but to do so, I needed to look up something. And then I started looking up something, and and from there I got somewhere else, and I got somewhere else, and I got completely distracted. And I'm like, "Hey, Christine, what's happening here? You no longer are able to focus." And I'm a person, I usually am 100% focused on anything. So to a point where no one can distract me when I'm in a good place.
Mhm.
And at that time, I could no longer concentrate. And the other weird thing is I could watch my brain thinking. Usually I'm a pretty fast thinker. And at that stage, I could watch it think one step after the other. And it was so weird. And then I was like, I have to take a break. I went to the shopping mall nearby. I walked through the hall there. I started crying and I'm like, I need help. I cannot deal with this anymore. And I'm glad I did. And this was the hardest decision I ever made in my life, to ask for help at this stage. Because I mean, I was Mrs. Important. I was Mrs. Powerhouse, and and there I was, and I was like, I I can't deal with this anymore. And so I walked out there and I called up my doc, and I called up my physician and said, I need help. And I obviously am very lucky, because usually here in Germany, when you need psychotherapy, you have to wait for like half a year, maybe even more, because there is such a shortage of therapists
Mhm.
here. And I went to see my physician, and he said, well, actually, I have a friend. He's a psychiatrist, and that's his number. And I got an appointment the very next day. So
Wow.
yeah, I was really lucky. And it was really also interesting to go through that therapy, because at some point I'm like, okay, I have no idea what's happening here, but I think I'm like, I need to do something about it. And yeah, it was interesting. So thinking about it, thinking about recognizing my patterns. And the psychiatrist, he was so confrontative, so he drove me crazy. But that was a good thing, because then I regained my strength, and I regained really my will to actually, yeah, take my life in my own hands. And this is where it all started. And then, and the other interesting thing is, at that stage, I had already gone through a training, which in Germany is called Heilpraktiker. So this is a special education for people who can open their practice, just like a practitioner would do, a medical practitioner would do,
Mhm.
but for complementary medicine. And I had gone through that training. I had gone through a lot of different therapy trainings. So I thought I knew everything about how the brain works and how we work. And yes, of course, I have my coping strategies. And no, I hadn't. And so this was it. And yeah, it took me 5 months to recover so that I
Mhm.
could go back to work.
And what changes did you make when you went back to work? What changes did you make?
So the first change I made is that I literally became more present. So I literally made it my duty to be where I am in the moment I am. Because before that, I always thought I'm not in the right place at the right time.
Mhm.
And then I started to actually appreciate the things around me, appreciate, yeah, focusing on what I've been doing at that time. And also making sure that I made time for the three different constituencies in my life that I had to pay attention to. And yes, and I asked for part-time work. That's the other thing I did, because I was like, I can't go on with the
Yeah.
life I've done. And yeah, the sad story is that I was uh, I was allowed to work part-time for 3 weeks only before I got my package.
Okay. Sad? Is it really sad?
It was sad at that time. It probably
Yeah.
was a good thing to happen. Yeah, sure.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. So now you work full time for yourself. Is that right?
Yes. Yes. I work full-time for myself. And you mentioned the different certificates that I have acquired over the time, and there are a few more. Because what I was always looking for, and what I have been looking for, should I say, is methods, techniques that are special in a way that they are not well known, but very, very um, effective. So
Yes.
this is what I was looking for. And the three that you mentioned, positive intelligence and also NeuroGraphica and the trust technique, they're completely different aspects of coaching, but all of the three are extremely helpful, extremely powerful. And it took me quite a long time to understand how I can weave them together and how I can put all of what I've learned together. And I'm glad I now found a way to do so.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, would you like to just walk us through all three of those?
Sure, sure. So, I mean, yes, I walk us through the three of them, and then I'll tell a bit more about the concept or the framework that I have developed as an umbrella for all of them. So the first one I came across, or the first two, I should say, is really NeuroGraphica and the trust technique. And NeuroGraphica, and unfortunately, I'm in my vacation home, because otherwise, when I would be at home, you would see drawings behind my back, because NeuroGraphica is a creative visual coaching method or therapy method. And the idea is that we are all visual beings. So when we see things, it's so much easier for us to process things. But on the other hand, not everyone can really draw or would say about themselves that they are able to draw. And so NeuroGraphica is a way that simplifies the drawing to a point where everyone who can kind of hold a pen can use drawing to work on their own problems, on their own goals, on their vision in a visual format. And the way we're doing this is we're using very uh, simple shapes. So we're only using 4 shapes in NeuroGraphica, and that's circles, that's squares, and that's triangles. And then
Mm-hmm.
we have a very specific type of line. It's called a NeuroGraphica line, and it's a line that is not repetitive. So usually when we draw lines, it's either straight or it's kind of waves, but NeuroGraphica lines are really, yeah, very diverse. And because of this diversity, it takes some effort to draw them. And this effort really brings us into the drawing, brings us into our topic, because every NeuroGraphica is drawn about a topic. And so by spending time drawing, we start, or our unconscious start thinking about the topic. And the interesting thing is, when you draw, there are things showing up on paper that you could not talk about, because to talk about something, it has to be conscious.
Mm-hmm.
But when you draw things, you suddenly see something on paper that makes you think. And especially when working with a coach, which is always a good thing, because yes, another person can ask different questions, as you well know, and can have a different perspective. And so what appears on paper then is a basis of, well, why is there a blank space on the right upper page, right upper part of the page? Or why do you have color here but not here? And so this is an interesting thing. And what appears on paper really is the current status of how we feel, of how things are. And then the fantastic thing about NeuroGraphica is that we then can change what's on paper immediately. So we can model our preferred state. We can model our future. And because our eyes see what's on paper, the brain thinks this is already reality, and it's much easier for us to achieve what's there. So it's an interesting, and it's a bit hard to talk about it, but maybe you can link to some of the videos I have on YouTube, where I explain a bit more about NeuroGraphica and how it works.
Yes, and let's just bring up your website quickly
Oh,
here.
yeah.
These are typical
Exactly.
pictures, I'm guessing you're referring to, that we're seeing
Yes.
here.
Yes. So different types. So in NeuroGraphica, we have different algorithms, and it's
Mhm.
really literally something you go through, because I'm not an artist, and those are my pictures. So they are not really artistic, but they are pretty nice to look at, I would say.
Yeah.
And yes, everyone has a particular topic behind. So this, for example, is me and the world. This is a neuro tree where I was growing an idea that I had at that time. And this is an algorithm that we use to resolve conflict. And so every single drawing has its own story and has its coaching progress, coaching journey behind.
Wow. And you also teach, by the looks of it, you teach the course on how to do that. Awesome.
Exactly. So I not only use it with my coachees, but I also teach it.
Mm.
Yeah,
Okay, so that's NeuroGraphica. Is there anything
that's
else we need to know about that?
it has been, or yeah, it has been developed and still is further developed by a Russian guy called
Hmm.
Pavel Piskarov. And yeah, and there is a growing community out there. So there are millions of people already drawing NeuroGraphica lines, and it's just amazing. It's an interesting approach because, as I said, we can work with the unconscious. We can
Absolutely.
bring
Yeah.
unconscious thoughts to the surface, which is great.
Yes. And in the EFT world, we have something called picture tapping.
Mm,
And it's really good to work with children with that. So they
mm,
draw a picture and then you literally just tap on what is on the picture. You
mm.
don't even analyze it, like, the red ball, the pink
Wow,
square,
yeah.
yeah. So
Wow.
it's very good. So it's a very good way of accessing our subconscious.
Mm. Hmm.
I use it a lot. Awesome.
Cool.
Okay, so positive intelligence. So,
Positive intelligence. Positive intelligence is really something I've come across only like 3 years ago. And it has been developed by a person called Shirzad. And his goal was to simplify coaching to the very basics. So,
mhm,
like when you look at all the colors that we have, we can simplify them down. All of them are a mixture of, yeah,
the primary colors.
primary colors. And so
Mhm,
he said there are three things. Well, we want to improve our lives. There are three things that we need to do. First of all, we need to become aware of the self sabotage that we're doing. So we need to catch our saboteurs. To do so, we need to find a way to reset our thinking, reset our mind. And then there is the power of he calls it the inner sage,
mhm,
that we can then use to look at things in a different way, through different eyes, and a different perspective, to then find a solution for our current situation. And so he talks about saboteurs, and the main saboteur is really our judge. The interesting thing from his approach is that he talks about the saboteurs not so much about the inner voice, but as little figurines. And I tend to say, well, this is someone who's sitting on my shoulder, and from time to time he's getting up and whispering in my ear. And the great thing about that is that I can then actually manage this external entity much better than if I thought it was me, or it's
yes.
part of me. And
Mm,
so there is this judge, and so the judge has really three different things he's judging. First is ourselves. So I'm never good enough. That's what the judge is saying.
mhm,
It's always, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, you're not good enough. But then the other two aspects are, we're blaming someone else. So whenever something happens, oh yeah, it's this person or that person, or it's the situation. And so
Mhm,
blaming the situation, I will be happy if, I will be happy when, that's also something that Shirzad um, is saying that the judge is. And then the judge has accomplices. And for example, one of my accomplices, of course, is the high achiever. So my saboteur is trying to tell me that good is never enough. Good is never good enough. And then there is the restless, who says that there is always more to do. So there is no time to rest because there is so many other things to do. Then,
and that That's the little sucker that's responsible for our burnout.
Exactly. Exactly. Or we have the controller who tells us that we always need to have everything in control.
Mhm.
Well, we all know it's not possible because we can't control our lives, but that's the little figurine who tells us, yeah, you need to do that. You need to do it on your own because no one else is as good as you doing it. Or we also have the victim. So the one that's saying, yeah, no wonder because yes, it's their fault and poor little thing, we cannot do anything about it. So,
Right.
and he has come up with 9 different accomplices, and there is a pretty nice online test, a free online test for those of you who are interested in understanding, because we all have all the saboteurs, but there is a bit of a difference of how much they're active in our life. Like the
Mhm.
stickler is the one who always wants to do everything very precisely, so that's the perfectionist. I'm not having that a lot, but it's a saboteur that's pretty common. But
Yes.
the interesting thing is that those saboteurs, they are really the extreme of our strength, because yes, it's great to strive for better results. It's great to be active rather than being a couch potato. But there is this extreme of when they don't let us rest. And Shirzad Chamine has a pretty nice image for that. So he says that when there is a hot surface, like on your oven, for example, and you put your hand on it, it's good to understand that it hurts and that it's hot so you can take it away. But
Mhm.
those little saboteurs, it's like they push down your hand on the hot stove, telling you it hurts, isn't it? It really hurts. It's not very nice. It's not very agreeable. It's not nice. It's not pleasant. It hurts, but we keep our hand there. And so this is how he describes that. And I really love it because it's so simple. It's so simplified. And there is also an app that he offers, like a 6-week app, um, where he then goes through all the little PQ reps. He calls them PQ reps. So, because when we want to become stronger muscle wise, we do reps for our muscles. And we understand that we have to do them so that our muscle grows. And he says that for our mental muscle, we need to do those positive intelligence reps. And I now have come to call them micro breaks,
Mhm.
because, or micro resilience breaks, even, because they're really, really short breaks. It's like a minute or two, but they help us reset our mind, our body functions, and really help us to then be able this different perspective, take this different perspective, which is the sage perspective. And again, there he describes different powers that the sage have, like empathy, so looking at things through an empathetic children's eye, or the eye of um, a researcher, scientist, because you want to also be able to detach yourself emotionally, or through the eyes of your elderly self, sitting somewhere in a nice, comfy chair and looking at the situation today, and well, asking how important it will be in like 100 years. And so very, very straightforward approach, really
Mhm.
streamlined, and yeah, extremely great also to get very fast change in people.
Yes, because those characters, once you realize they're there and you've separated them out,
Mm,
then like, the sage you can like turn to and ask for advice, and you can take more control over the controlling one, and like no, I understand what's happening here, but you can
yeah,
just calm down a bit. Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah,
Oh, I
yeah,
love that concept.
yeah. And the sage, we could also say that's the real me, because if I
Mhm.
take everything away, the real me really is that sage,
Yes.
and that really wise person.
Yeah.
hopefully.
Yeah. Hopefully you've chosen a wise sage.
Yeah,
Awesome.
it's true.
Okay. So, and
Hmm.
then we have the trust technique.
And we have the trust technique. That's really my favorite one. And I know when we had our first conversation and I mentioned the trust technique, and Louise say, "Oh yeah, I worked with James and Shelley like so many times
Years
ago." I'm
ago.
like,
Yeah, yeah,
wow, that's fantastic because unfortunately, not a lot of people know the trust technique so far. And yes, a lot of them are already into it, especially those on Facebook and those who have some connections, especially to horses, because that's also the first time I came across this this approach, like in 2017, where there is a video of a person, a man walking onto a pasture, and then horses come to him one after the other, lying down next to him, and I'm like,
Mhm.
wow, this person is incredible. And then there came this point where I was even more surprised because, hey, I could learn that. I could study how to do that. And by no way, by no means, I am not this person who is walking onto a pasture and every horse is lying down beside me. But I've now practicing the trust technique for, yeah, 8 years. And I have gone through their education. I've become a practitioner with them. I'm now introducing other people into this method of working with their animals or being with their animals, because that's
Mhm.
our main purpose, is to make sure that we understand that animals are sentient and emotional creatures as well, just like us. They have an opinion, and they have every right to have an opinion because they are grown-ups. Sometimes we treat them like little kids, but I mean, if I live with a dog, if I live with a horse, my horse now is 9 years old. She's a grown-up person, so she's a or grown-up horse. She has her opinion, she has her voice, and I give her that voice. And it's so wonderful what can happen when we actually listen. So the trust technique um, is a communication that is focusing on listening, on observing of what the animal wants and needs, and it's so wonderful. And I'm so blessed because James French, he has a huge membership of his video course members, and I'm hosting the podcast together with him once a month, where we answer questions, and he is talking about the different situations. And he's just an incredible person, and his partner, or his wife, Shelley Slingo, is of course as well. And they together they bring such a great change to the world, and I'm blessed to be one of their. I would probably call myself an ambassador, or they have now started a pioneer program. So yeah, that's what we do. And what's your remember your memory of the trust technique, of how James worked with you?
Well, I'm just thinking there was three very instrumental people that were involved with my horse. So the first one was Linda Tellington Jones,
Mm,
or rather her sister
mm,
Robin Hood, doing the T-touch.
mhm,
So I learnt the T-touch. I got asked by a friend to go and look at somebody's horse. They had this 4-year-old horse well, she's 3 at the time. I think they brought her in from the paddock, never had any human contact, was a beautiful Palomino Welsh Section D, and she was terrified, absolutely terrified. They'd had her in for a year, but she was
mm,
still terrified of humans.
mm,
So I took her on the course with me. I worked with her. She then started to trust humans. So talk about the trust technique. But Robin was only here for a 2-week period. So
mm,
when I took her back from there, I carried on working with her. But then it got to the point where I needed to back her, and I knew that I couldn't do that on my own. So somebody recommended James. James came along, and it was one of the most magical experiences because he gave her Reiki. He telepathically communicated with her. In fact, they were communicating on his journey coming to see her. And I can't remember how long it took, probably just a few weeks or so. But you know, he got her between us. We got her to a stage where we could lay on her back and she
Mm.
wouldn't react. She was totally comfortable and fine with that. And then came that magical day that we were going to back her and sit on her back, but it was raining outside, so we had to take her into the stable. And James started like vaulting onto her back. She was only 14.3 and he's quite tall, but he was
Oh,
like jumping onto her back, like bareback. And she was just loving it. And he'd go from one side to the other and slide off and fall on the ground. And she stood like this was an extremely sensitive, reactive mare to any sound, any movement. And she was standing for him. And in the end, he got so tired, he went to the door as if to say, like, that's enough, I can't do any more. And she went up to him, she curled her head and neck around him, and she pulled him back in the stable. Then she planted all 4 feet and looked at him and went, do it again. And that's how we backed her, you know, with love, with Reiki, with understanding, with communication, with, yeah, it was amazing.
wow. Yeah,
So,
that's so him.
yeah.
That's wonderful. And yeah, and that's interesting because I mean I have another trainer that I used to work in the past. And when I told him that the trust technique, that we make sure that our horses are inviting us to back them before doing so, he was like, "Oh, I never experienced that. If that's possible, I would like to understand how he did it." Because, yeah, and even that person, he calls himself a horse diplomat, and that shows us how, yeah, how medieval the horse world still is, because we're
Mhm.
treating them like, I don't know, like,
Yeah, like something we have to battle, break their
yeah,
will, and get them to surrender to us sitting on their backs.
yeah, yeah. And that is the biggest teaching from the trust technique, is that this whole concept of dominance, this whole concept of we need to lead and we need to be the leader and decide what to do, it's so wrong. And
Mm.
the good thing is that, because you said at the beginning, I'm very heavily science based. So I really love things to be somehow logical,
Explainable, logical and
explainable.
explainable.
Exactly. And the interesting thing is that the behavioral research in the last only 5 to 10 years has now found out that this concept of dominance doesn't exist in a animal world. It doesn't exist with horses. It doesn't exist with dogs. And the myth only came up because in previous times, the um, the observations that the behaviorists got were from horses and dogs, or wolves in that case, in enclosure. And in enclosures, they react differently because they have not
Because they're
full,
trapped.
they're trapped, and they have restricted resources.
Hmm.
And in nature, a horse herd is a family, is a family. And of course, the mother knows most, and so the youngsters follow her. But there are situations where a youngster says, "Oh, I'm thirsty. Well, let's go and have something to drink," and everyone else follows. So this is pretty common. And also in the wolf pack, it's the parents, and it's nothing else than parenting. And when we start comparing how to be with our animals with parenting, it becomes so much more meaningful.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So you were going to tell us about how the umbrella, how you put all of those three things together.
Yeah, so it took me a long time because I'm like, these are so different fields, and how can I pull them together? And I have found this, or I have come up with this framework called Neuropositive.
Hmm.
And interestingly enough, the first reaction that I sometimes get is, "Are you working with people who are neurodiverse?" And
Which is my reaction, yes.
exactly. And in some situation I do, because I tend to work with a lot of gifted or highly gifted people. And we probably wouldn't call ourselves neurodiverse, because that's not a kind of something that should be treated, and can be treated probably.
Hmm.
However, yes, the way of thinking is a bit different there. But neuropositive for me it's based on neuroscience. So as I said, I want things to be logical and explainable. And I love this idea of positive intelligence. And overall, this comes also from positive psychology. This way of looking at psychology, not only to say, well, there is an issue, let's make sure that we get people back on track, but hey, what can we do so that people can have a better life? And this is the idea of positive psychology, and that's why I thought this combination of neuro and positive is exactly what I want to look into. So this is how this name came about. And oh, have a bit of water here. I've been talking so much over the last few days. And then the idea was, okay, how can I frame that? My whole thinking, my whole ideas, and I've come up with 4 principles of neuropositive. And the first one, and probably the most important one, is presence.
Hmm.
Based on my experience prior to my burnout, where I was never really present where I was when I was. And to me, that's also the first thing whenever I work with a coachee. First thing I'm giving them is a way, as I said, these micro resilience breaks, so that they can really quickly and easily reset their minds, settle down. And I get into how the autonomic nervous system is regulating us and why it's so important. Yes, the active state is important, but we're losing out on this quiet state that our body is made for. We're made for being in this quiet state most of the time, and a lot of people never are anymore. And that's why this presence, this really being here and now, is so important to me, because it's the only place from where I can also listen to others, where I can observe things that are going on. And isn't that what we are here for? We're not. I remember um, Neil Welsh saying, he's the one, Conversations with God, that
Neil
we're
Donald Walsh, yeah.
Neil Donald Walsh. Oh, sure. I'm always struggling with names. I know that
Yes,
I
me
know the
too.
titles, but not the names. I somehow
Yeah,
don't remember them. And so he once said, "We're not human doings, but human beings," and that's exactly it. So prior to my burnout, I was 100% a human doing. I was
hmm
defining myself through the things I got done.
mm
And I totally forget to be, to live.
mhm.
And this is why this is really at the beginning of when I work with coaches, with clients. That's the first step that I want them to relearn, because some of them really have to relearn that. And then the second part is perspective. And that is something that I also learned from the trust technique. And in the trust technique, we also have this way of, we call them thinking levels in that case. So we say we have a thinking level between 0, where we are flat out sleeping and dreaming, up to 10, where we're in full panic. And we need to bring that down, because we cannot perceive the world in the best way. We are not able to learn, we are not able to listen if we are in this panic state in 7, 8, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10. We can only do that when we are at a level of maybe between 3 and 5, where we are
mm
awake, but we're open to listen. And so this is the perspective, looking through our own different
mhm.
eyes in a more relaxed state, but then also walking in other people's shoes. Because sometimes the mere fact that I'm taking on a different perspective. So taking on the perspective of my client, walk into the customer's shoes is something that is really trained and taught a lot in the business world. Or I walk in my manager's shoes. In the company I worked for in the first 9 years, I had 18 different managers. And so I learned how to understand pretty quickly how they wanted to interact with me and what was important to them. So this is another thing, to take different perspectives. So my own perspective changed that because I'm not stressed out anymore, but can look at the world through different eyes. And at the same time, I'm able to take on different perspectives. So that's the second part. And then the third part is purpose, because I want to know why I'm getting up every morning. I want to understand what is my purpose in life. And to me, purpose is a bit more practical than meaning. I know a lot of people looking for trying to find the meaning in life, and I'm convinced that we just have to give it a meaning. So it's our job to say, okay, this is what I'm here for. This is what I want to do. This is what is important to me, and this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. So this purpose part, and there's a lot of research around purpose and a lot of it's one of these hype terms, I guess, these days. And then the last one is progress. And progress to me is no longer the bigger, higher, faster. To me, progress is that I want to move on in my life. I want to learn. I want to grow. I want to understand more and more what's going on out there. I want to understand more and more what others are doing and thinking and how they behave. And progress to me really is small steps, really small steps. And this is, for example, something that I've learned through the trust technique. When we want horses to understand that jumping next to them or even jumping onto them is nothing bad, we need to start with little steps to get there. We can't do
Yes.
it at once. We need those little steps. And this is what's important for me to also let my coachees know, my clients know, is that it's really the little steps that matters, and it's the step that you're actually doing. Because another mentor of mine once said, Christine, you can have a gazillion ideas, they're both nothing. Your idea is only worth something if you take action, if
Yes.
you make it happen, if you produce something, if you let others know about it. And so this first part of progress there. So yeah, and NeuroGraphica, of course, I'm interspersing that because uh, once we have an idea, we can put that on paper. If we don't have, we can draw it and get it from there. So it's a wonderful method that I'm using here and there, and yeah, so that's what I'm doing.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, you can see how they all do dovetail together, but you can also see how you had to sit back and be very present and like, how do these work together?
Yeah. Yes.
Awesome. So could you give us maybe some couple of case studies or some shifts that you've noticed people having?
Yeah, I've seen in when working with, well, mainly I work with leadership clients, and I had one coming to me saying that, well, Christine, I have such a hard time having interaction with this particular person because I just get nervous whenever I see him. I'm getting so angry because I just don't like that person or so. And we did a little PQ wrap in that case. So this little micro break where we take a pen and just closely look at the pen, follow the pen. And she said that, Christine, it was so interesting because I had now an encounter with him, and he started reacting as he always did. And I was just thinking about the pen, and I was looking at my glass of wine I had at that time, and I was non reactive. And this is how quickly it can go.
Hmm.
Or, yeah, many situations like that where I had clients very close to burnout, where they, yeah, bit like me, were the
Hmm.
usually women in my case, very important and and productive, and yeah, finding out that it's not always the best to do more, but sometimes it's better to do less. I have one particular case where I had a woman in a pretty high position in a company, and she was struggling in this environment with the white old man, and she tried to be one of them, which obviously didn't turn out to work. And she had developed a bit of an imposter syndrome, so she felt that she was not good enough, and everyone would find out that she is not as good as others think she is. And yeah, based on our conversations, she left that job. She quit that job, found a different job with a manager that, or an executive that really admired her. And she's now COO of a really big company, and thriving because everyone accepts her as the woman she is and the powerful person she is. And yeah, so many different cases. And also with the animals, I mean, those are little cases, but dogs that couldn't go for a walk because they would be aggressive and bark at everything and everyone, and jump forward, and now they can have a quiet walk. And it's just amazing of how people can change when they get the right, maybe the right tools, but also I think it all starts with having the understanding that it all starts with themselves.
Yes.
And
And that that we really truly are in charge of our mindset, but we have to first understand that we are in charge of it. And we're never taught that. We're never taught that
no,
at
no, and
all.
we're often not aware of what's going on in ourselves.
No. So it's interesting you say that it's predominantly women who have burnout.
The ones that I worked with, or actually the ones that I worked with, it's, I think it's both. I think that women are more open about it. Men
Okay.
take a
And
longer time.
women are more likely to do something about it. They're more
Yeah.
likely to look for tools to deal with that, whereas men probably just keep pushing through until they get super sick and
It,
can't
yeah.
do anything.
Yeah, I think that's what happens.
Mm.
Because they are men, the ones that I worked with, several of them, they were looking for a quick fix that would not require them to change their usual way of being.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So they're looking for a magic wand solution and not have to put much into
Yeah.
them
Yeah.
themselves. Whereas I think women are tend to, because we're more probably emotional beings, would tend
Mm.
to more want to go into that deep change. So,
Yeah.
I teach a course called the Freedom Series, and one of the areas, well, we look at 5 different areas, and one of them is our sense of responsibility.
Mm.
And a lot of us, including myself, firstborns, usually have a great sense of responsibility. And we take on that responsibility for the world, which I
Mm.
think you probably did and I did, because I used to, work, 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 travel the world. Also that sense of, pride in what you're doing.
Mm.
Um, the next area we look at is boundaries.
Mhm.
Then we look at self-care, what are our
Mm.
values in life, and what is our purpose.
Mm.
So, but all of those things are like super important. The boundaries, the self-care, really giving yourself that time off, that space. And, I like the idea of, the little statues on your shoulder, because
Mm.
you know, they really, if you let them, they'll keep driving you until they they drive you into the ground.
Yeah, 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 they do. And they can. That's the
Mm,
sad thing. But
yeah,
there we can do something about it.
we have the solutions. All right,
Mm.
Christine, we could talk for hours, but if there was a parting something that you would like to share with us, what would that be?
I would say that, yeah, I would say that understand how your mind works and how your body works is really important. So take some time to look into, especially your autonomic nervous system. I think this to me was an eye opener. Once you understand the difference between in a fight or flight stress response or a rest, digest, living and thriving state, and how to get there and what this does, I think this is really crucial.
Absolutely, it is. Thank you. And if people want to contact you, where would they find you?
They could find me on my website, which is just my first name dash last name, Christine-Schickinger.com. And I have the opportunity there, of course, to book some time with me. And I look forward to speaking to a lot of new people there.
Yeah, and your podcasts, they're also available on your website?
And my podcast is available on my website as well as on YouTube and Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So just I think looking for my last name is the easiest because,
There's
as you
not many people.
noticed, it's not very
Unusual.
common.
All right, Christine, thank you so much. I've loved our conversation together today, and I'm sure we'll be having many more in the future. So lots of love to you, lots of love to James if you're watching,
Yeah.
and Shelley, of course. And thank you, Christine, and enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Thank you for listening. Take care. Bye bye.